The galaxy was a vast and unforgiving expanse, teeming with countless races, each more advanced or more dangerous than the next. Civilizations had risen and fallen over millennia, each believing they had discovered the secret to immortality, each sure that they had conquered the stars in their own way. Among them were technologies far beyond the understanding of even the most sophisticated species, relics from long-forgotten eras, pieces of ancient science so advanced that the very concept of them defied logic. None of them, however, were as mysterious or as coveted as the armor of the ancients. The armor had once been the stuff of myth, whispered about by those who had encountered it only in the deepest, darkest corners of the universe. Its creation was shrouded in mystery, an artifact said to be forged from the very fabric of the cosmos itself, designed to adapt to its wearer's biology and enhance their physical abilities to god-like proportions. It was said that no species had ever been able to bond with the armor, and no one had been able to wield its full power. Every race that had come across it, from the aristocratic Dimner to the brutal and destructive Xerix, had failed. The armor would not accept them. The armor had rejected every alien. For centuries, it had laid dormant on a forgotten world, buried deep beneath a planet of toxic gases and constant storms. It had been kept hidden, kept away from the hands of the greedy and the ambitious, for fear that its incredible power might fall into the wrong hands. Many had searched for it, but no one could ever quite figure out how to unlock its secrets. The armor would not yield. And then, one day, a human stumbled across it. Elias Ward was not a hero in the traditional sense. He was not a soldier, nor a diplomat, nor a brilliant scientist. He was an explorer, a man with an unquenchable thirst for discovery. His work had taken him across the stars to uncharted systems, far beyond the reach of the civilizations that had mapped the galaxy's known territories. He was a simple man, not seeking fame or fortune, but the unknown. He had no idea what was waiting for him on the planet known as Jormik, but it was a place few had dared venture. A place of ruin and legend. Elias had heard stories about the armor, of course. Everyone had. But most had dismissed them as nothing more than fairy tales. What could a mere human possibly do with something so powerful, something that had rejected every alien species before them? But his curiosity, as always, got the better of him. After all, what was a life worth living if it was spent only searching for what had already been found? His ship landed on the barren planet, a rust-colored world with blackened skies and a surface scarred by ancient, forgotten conflicts. The planet had once been a thriving hub of commerce and knowledge, home to a race long extinct. Now, it was little more than a monument to their failure, a place where only the bravest or most foolish ventured. Elias's landing was nothing spectacular. He hadn't expected it to be. The area he landed in was desolate, a broken landscape full of crumbling ruins and twisted spires. Yet, as he trudged through the dust and debris, his heart raced with anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He knew that somewhere in the ruins, buried beneath the rubble, the armor waited. It wasn't long before he found it. The entrance to the ancient vault was hidden deep inside the planet's largest canyon, a place that had been untouched by time. A doorway stood there, half crushed by the weight of a collapsed building. But Elias's keen instincts told him that something vital lay beyond it. He used a small laser cutter from his pack, and after hours of work, he broke through. What he discovered on the other side was beyond anything he could have imagined. The vault was vast, filled with rows of ancient artifacts, most of them broken or decayed with age. Yet at the center of the room, lying in the darkened shadows, was a massive suit of armor. Its design was unlike anything Elias had ever seen, sleek, alien in its smoothness, yet at the same time strangely familiar. Its surface shimmered in the dim light, as if it were alive, changing in response to the faintest movement. He stepped forward, heart pounding in his chest, and reached out to touch the armor. The moment his fingers made contact with the surface, he felt a strange pulse, a hum that ran through his body like an electric current. The armor responded to him. It was as if it had awakened from a long slumber, and for the first time in history, the armor had accepted its new owner. Elias didn't fully understand what was happening, but he didn't hesitate. He stepped into the suit, and the armor seemed to mold itself around him, fitting to his form like a second skin. He had expected it to be heavy, cumbersome, but instead, it felt light, too light. It was as though the armor had anticipated his every movement, adjusted itself to his every need. The moment he was fully encased in the armor, Elias felt a surge of power like he had never known before. His senses sharpened, his strength increased exponentially, and he felt more alive than he ever had. The armor had unlocked something in him, something deep within his very being. His mind raced with information and understanding of how the armor functioned, how it could be wielded, how it could transform the very fabric of reality around him. But something else, too, was growing in Elias. A strange connection to the armor itself. It wasn't just a tool, it was a living entity, a sentient being that had rejected every other species, yet had chosen him. There was something about humanity that the armor had recognized, something that made Elias Ward different from the countless beings who had come before him. Something that made humanity unique in the grand, sprawling chaos of the universe. He tested the limits of the armor, pushing himself beyond the capabilities of a normal human. He could jump to heights that defied logic. He could lift objects that were many times his weight with ease. His senses became sharper, his reflexes faster, and he felt the overwhelming sense of power surge through him with each passing moment. But as the hours passed, Elias realized something even more remarkable. The armor had not simply enhanced him, it had transformed him. He felt more than just physically different. The connection between him and the armor was growing, deepening. He could feel the thoughts of the armor, the consciousness of something far older and far wiser than any species in the galaxy. The armor was alive, but not in the conventional sense. It had been waiting for the right being to bond with, and it had finally found its partner in him, a human. For the first time, Elias understood the reason behind the armor's rejection of every other species. It was not a simple matter of compatibility, it was a matter of trust. The armor had been created by a race long extinct, a race that had been too proud, too arrogant in their pursuit of perfection. The armor was meant to be a protector, a guardian for those who would wield it. And the armor had been waiting for a being who understood the value of humility, the value of strength tempered with compassion. It had been waiting for humanity, waiting for someone like Elias. As Elias stepped out of the vault, the world around him seemed different. The air felt thicker, the colors of the sky sharper. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself had bent to accommodate his new form. He was no longer just a man, he was a force of nature, a being enhanced by an ancient, powerful technology that had once rejected the very notion of such a bond. The galaxy, it seemed, had underestimated the human race. The armor that had rejected every alien species had now found its match in a human. But even as Elias reveled in his newfound power, a sense of unease began to stir in him. What was the cost of such power? What consequences would arise from this union between man and armor? And more importantly, what would the galaxy do when they discovered that humanity now wielded the ultimate weapon, an artifact that had been feared by every species across the stars? Elias didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear: the universe had just been changed. The armor had chosen its wielder, and it had chosen humanity. For the first time in a long time, humanity had a weapon that could rival even the most powerful civilizations. And with this weapon, Elias knew that they would have to face the consequences of their rise. The armor that rejected every alien had found a human. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Elias stood motionless in the vast, barren ruins of the ancient vault, the hum of the armor's energy reverberating through him. His body felt lighter than air, yet every fiber of his being was now pulsing with power. It was almost too much to comprehend. How had this happened? How had humanity, a species so young in the grand scheme of the galaxy, been chosen by something so ancient, so incomprehensibly advanced? He felt the armor's presence in his mind, not as an invasive force, but as a subtle, ever-present whisper. It wasn't quite speaking to him in words, but Elias could sense its awareness, its understanding of him. The armor seemed to know his every thought before he even formed it, and in return, he knew the armor, its history, its purpose. The connection was undeniable. As Elias activated the armor's communication systems, streams of data flooded his consciousness. Ancient schematics, alien languages, and blueprints unfolded in his mind, each one presenting an intricate network of information that, while overwhelming, felt strangely natural to process. The armor was far more than just a tool. It was a living, sentient being that had been designed not only to protect, but to guide. He took a deep breath, and for a moment, felt the familiar weight of his human limitations. Yet, the armor was there around him, within him, and it seemed to lift him above those limitations. For the first time, he wasn't just Elias Ward, the human explorer, he was something more. He could feel the stars calling to him, the distant echoes of untapped potential, the infinite possibilities of the universe unfolding before him. But with that newfound awareness came an unsettling realization. If the armor had chosen him, why? He wasn't a warrior, nor a ruler. He had no ambitions to dominate the galaxy. He was just a man seeking knowledge. Yet, the armor had given itself to him, accepting him as its new partner, and the more he thought about it, the more he understood, it wasn't simply about physical strength. The armor had rejected every alien race because none had understood the true meaning of its power until humanity came along. The galactic empire of the Dimner, the savage Xerix, the technologically advanced Serati, they had all tried to harness the armor, to claim it as their own. But none had succeeded. They had sought the armor as a weapon, a tool to further their own agendas. The armor had refused them, knowing that it needed something far different. It needed a species that could temper strength with humility, power with understanding. Humanity, despite its flaws, had always shown an incredible capacity for growth, for resilience, for learning from its mistakes. It had been that very unpredictability, that potential for both greatness and destruction, that made it the perfect candidate for the armor's bond. Elias took his first step out of the ruins, his mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. As he moved through the canyon, the landscape seemed to shift around him. The stones beneath his feet hummed with a subtle resonance, as if the very fabric of the planet itself responded to the presence of the armor. His ship was still where he had left it, though it felt small now, almost insignificant compared to the vast power that now surged through him. As he approached, he paused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. There was a sudden presence, a disturbance in the air. It wasn't just the planet, or the armor, it was something else, something he couldn't quite place. He scanned the horizon and felt a cold shiver race down his spine. In the distance, a fleet of ships, sleek and menacing, descended from the sky, their silhouettes unmistakable. The Xerix. The Xerix were a brutal race, a violent species that had made a name for themselves across the galaxy by conquering weaker civilizations. They were vicious, relentless, and their ships were among the most feared in the galaxy. Elias had heard rumors of their interest in the armor, their desire to claim it as their own. And now, it seemed, they had found him. He could feel the armor's presence like a second heartbeat, its pulse growing stronger as the ships approached. The sensation was both comforting and overwhelming. He was not alone. The armor would help him. But how? And why? The Xerix ships landed with a thunderous crash, their hulking forms casting long shadows over the ground. From the lead ship emerged a group of soldiers, massive creatures with thick, armored exoskeletons, their weapons drawn and their eyes filled with murderous intent. Their leader, a towering Xeric named Korak, stepped forward, his eyes scanning Elias with contempt. "You found it, human," Korak growled, his voice deep and gravelly. "The armor of the ancients. It belongs to the strongest, and we are the strongest." Elias felt a surge of anger, but also a strange calmness, as if the armor was preparing him for what was to come. He could feel the power coursing through him, but there was no desire to dominate, no hunger for battle. The armor did not want destruction. It wanted balance, control. But it would not hesitate to protect its chosen. "You'll never control it," Elias said, his voice steady. "It rejected your kind for a reason." Korak sneered, his massive hand gripping the handle of a battle axe that gleamed with deadly precision. "We will take it from you, human, just as we have taken everything else." Before he could react, Elias felt the armor pulse again, responding to the threat in ways he couldn't fully understand. His body surged forward with unnatural speed, faster than he had ever moved before. His arms raised instinctively, and before the Xeric leader could react, Elias was upon him, his hand gripping the hilt of Korak's axe, pushing it aside with an ease that left the Xeric leader reeling. "You think you understand power," Elias said, his voice resonating with authority, "but you don't." Korak roared and swung his axe in a wide arc, but Elias moved with a fluidity that was almost inhuman. With a quick, practiced motion, he dodged the blow, feeling the armor adapt to his movements, guiding him as he redirected the strike and brought Korak's weapon to the ground. The other Xerics rushed to their leader's aid, but Elias was faster, moving like a shadow, his movements perfectly synchronized with the armor. He disarmed one Xeric, using the creature's own momentum to send it crashing to the ground. Another swung a blade, but Elias caught it mid-air, twisting it from the Xeric's hand with a single, precise motion. Within moments, the Xerics were disarmed and incapacitated. They lay on the ground, groaning in defeat, their once proud and imposing figures humbled by the human who had claimed the armor. Korak, panting and enraged, struggled to his feet. "This isn't over," he spat. "We will come for you again. We will take it." Elias took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "The armor rejects you, just as it rejects your kind." The Xeric leader gritted his teeth, and with a final glance of hatred, he turned and signaled his forces to retreat. The Xeric fleet lifted into the air, their engines roaring as they departed the planet, leaving Elias standing in the wreckage of their failed assault. Elias stood there for a moment, feeling the power of the armor surge through him, knowing that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had already felt the first tremors of change. The armor had chosen him, and now, with its power, humanity would rise. But as the last of the Xeric ships vanished into the atmosphere, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The galaxy would soon learn of the armor's true power, and many would seek to claim it. Would humanity stand alone in this new era, or would they find allies and enemies among the stars? The answer was still unfolding. The armor had chosen a human, and the galaxy would soon know the price of underestimating humanity. Elias stood at the edge of the canyon, staring into the sky as the Xeric ships vanished into the distance. The armor, now fully attuned to him, hummed gently with power beneath his skin, and the weight of what had just transpired settled in his chest. The battle had been swift, almost too easy. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter was only the beginning of something far more significant, a ripple that would soon cascade across the galaxy. The Xerics, for all their brute strength and brutality, had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that the armor would bend to their will, just as they believed every other weapon had. But they were wrong. The armor had chosen him, Elias Ward, and with it, he felt an overwhelming responsibility. He turned away from the canyon, back toward his ship. It seemed almost small and insignificant now, a relic of the old life he had once known. But it was all he had, and as much as the armor had transformed him, Elias knew he still needed it to survive. He was still a human, a man in a galaxy filled with beings far more powerful than he could comprehend. Inside the ship, Elias sat at the console, his fingers brushing over the controls. He had a decision to make. The galaxy was vast, and its dangers were many. The Xerics were only one threat. Who knew what other factions might now come after him, after the armor? A soft, almost ethereal voice filled his mind, the armor, communicating in its own way. It was not intrusive, not commanding, but rather a gentle presence, one that seemed to offer reassurance. "You are not alone." Elias closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the armor's words. He had never truly understood how vast the universe was until now. And now that he had a weapon like no other, he understood how small he truly was in comparison. But the armor had chosen him. It had accepted him, and that bond was something no one else could break. He opened his eyes, his fingers moving swiftly to the ship's navigation system. There were others out there, others who would come for the armor. Some would come as enemies, others as allies. But Elias knew one thing: humanity was about to change. He wasn't sure if that change would be for better or worse, but he was determined to see it through. With a flick of a switch, the ship's engines roared to life. The ship lifted off the planet's surface, rising above the jagged cliffs and barren landscape. Elias gazed at the stars ahead, feeling the overwhelming pull of the unknown. Where should he go next? He had no concrete plan. The armor had chosen him for reasons beyond his understanding, and now he was going to discover what those reasons were. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, but Elias had the armor, and with it, he had something the galaxy had never seen before. As he flew toward the outer rim of the galaxy, Elias couldn't help but wonder what awaited him. He had fought the Xerics, but that was a mere skirmish. What about the other empires that had heard the whispers of the armor's power? What would the Serati think when they discovered the armor had chosen a human? And what about the rest of humanity? Elias had always been a wanderer, someone who never stayed in one place for too long, but now he had a purpose, a mission, however vague it might be. The question was, would humanity be ready for what was coming? The stars glittered before him, cold and distant, but Elias knew he wasn't truly alone. The armor was with him, guiding him. He felt it in every movement, every decision, as if the armor itself had become a part of his very being. But that bond went both ways. He had to understand the armor's purpose. And to do that, he needed to find answers. His first destination was an ancient research station, located on the edge of the galaxy, deep within a forgotten nebula. It was said to house the last surviving archives of a long-lost race and enigmatic species known only as the Eredic. No one knew what had happened to the Eredic, only that their technology was said to rival anything the galaxy had ever known. If the armor's origins were tied to them, then perhaps the station held answers. As he entered the nebula, the ship's sensors flickered and struggled to keep up. The dense clouds of ionized gas and dust played tricks on the readings, and for a moment, Elias felt a sense of isolation unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The nebula was alive with static energy, and for the first time since he had bonded with the armor, he felt a faint, disorienting pulse in his mind, a tug at his consciousness. Warning. Disturbance detected. The armor's voice was calm but insistent, like a distant echo in his mind. Elias tightened his grip on the controls, but the ship's systems began to fail. One by one, the navigation instruments powered down. The lights inside the cabin flickered. It was as though the nebula itself was draining the very life from his ship. "Stay with me," Elias whispered under his breath, his fingers moving quickly across the failing console, trying to override the systems. But it was useless. The nebula was too powerful. He glanced toward the viewport, his eyes narrowing. The station was just ahead, almost within reach. But as he approached, the station's once pristine exterior appeared damaged, its outer walls scarred from impacts, as though it had been abandoned or attacked long ago. A voice echoed in his mind. "The Eredic are gone. The station is a tomb." Elias shuddered. The armor's words were cryptic, but he understood the gravity of the situation. Something had happened to the Eredic. Something that had likely led to their downfall. And now, Elias was about to uncover their legacy. The ship lurched violently, throwing him against the harness as the gravitational forces of the nebula intensified. His mind was racing, and as the ship began its uncontrollable descent, he felt a sharp tug from the armor, a protective surge that stabilized the vessel just enough to keep it from crashing into the wreckage below. But the landing wasn't gentle. The ship crashed with a violent thud, the hull grinding against the surface of the station. Sparks flew from the controls, and Elias had to wrestle with the ship's damaged systems to avoid being overwhelmed by the explosion of energy surging through the cables. The moment the ship came to a stop, Elias wasted no time. He quickly donned the armor, its adaptive technology already responding to his movements. The suit enveloped him with a soft hum, its energy flowing like an extension of his own body. Outside, the station loomed ominously. The entrance to the station's core was barely visible, hidden beneath the debris of shattered walls and broken walkways. But Elias didn't hesitate. He knew this was where his journey would truly begin. As he made his way toward the station, the armor responded to his every need, scanning the environment for signs of life, hazards, and any remaining technology. The vast, abandoned station echoed with silence, and the sense of loss in the air was palpable. Whoever had built this place, whoever had once lived here, was gone. Yet their legacy remained. The first step he took inside the station, Elias felt a chill crawl down his spine. There was a dark presence here, something that the armor sensed as well. It wasn't just a desolate environment, it was something deeper. Something more ancient. The station's power systems were offline, but the armor seemed to hum in response, drawing on its own reserves of energy to fuel his exploration. As Elias ventured deeper into the ruins, he began to see signs of life, but not of the Eredic. Something else had come, something that had claimed this station long after its creators had vanished. Shadows moved in the dark. And Elias knew he was no longer alone. Elias's every sense was on high alert. His pulse quickened as the shadows seemed to shift in the dim light of the abandoned station. The armor, ever vigilant, hummed softly around him, its power resonating through his every movement, but there was something in the air, something ancient and unsettling. He could feel the weight of long-forgotten history pressing in on him, as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting for something to happen. He moved cautiously through the narrow corridors of the station, the metallic flooring creaking beneath his boots. The silence was almost unbearable, broken only by the hum of the armor and the distant echoes of his own footsteps. It felt like a tomb, an alien crypt with the remains of a forgotten civilization buried in its depths. As he passed through a wide chamber, his helmet's visor flickered for a moment, and he caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. A figure, humanoid, tall and cloaked in dark, tattered robes, stood just at the edge of his vision. His breath caught in his throat as the figure melted back into the darkness, its presence almost ghost-like. The armor pulsed, responding to the threat in the air, but Elias felt no immediate danger. The presence wasn't aggressive, it felt more like a guardian, an echo of something that had once lived here. Whoever or whatever it wasn't part of the Eredic, this was something else. "Hello?" Elias called into the silence, his voice strangely muffled in the vastness of the station. "Is anyone there?" His words echoed back at him, bouncing off the cold walls, but there was no response. Elias clenched his fists. He couldn't afford to hesitate, not now. The answers he was searching for were here, and whoever or whatever was lurking in the shadows could not deter him. He activated the ship's secondary power source, flooding the station with dim, flickering lights. For a brief moment, the entire structure seemed to shudder, as if awakening from a long slumber. The ancient systems groaned in protest, but they held. That's when he saw it. The door at the end of the corridor slid open with a low hiss, revealing a vast chamber beyond. In the center of the room stood a massive, intricately designed structure, an obelisk-like pillar, covered in glowing runes and symbols. The floor was marked with strange, alien inscriptions, and the walls were adorned with towering murals depicting beings with elongated limbs and luminous eyes. Elias approached the obelisk cautiously. As he drew closer, the armor responded, sending a cascade of data rushing into his mind. He could see the images in the murals come to life, flashing through his vision like memories of a time long past. The Eredic. They weren't just an ancient species, they had once been the architects of the very fabric of the galaxy, beings of immense power and intellect. But their downfall had come not through warfare or external threats. It had come because they had sought too much. They had reached beyond their means and uncovered knowledge they couldn't control, knowledge that had destroyed them. Elias felt a pang of sorrow for the lost race. Their ambition had led to their extinction, their creations left scattered in the galaxy as hollow monuments to their hubris. A voice, soft yet strong, reverberated in his mind. "You are not like them. You have not come for power." The words were clear now, not just the armor's guidance, but something more. Elias turned slowly, his eyes scanning the chamber. He wasn't alone. The figure from earlier, the cloaked being, stepped forward into the dim light. It was tall, impossibly so, with features that seemed almost too perfect, like a statue brought to life. The being's face was hidden beneath the hood of its robe, but its presence was overwhelming. It was as though every corner of the room bent toward it, every particle of air aware of its existence. Elias instinctively reached for the energy blade at his side, but the armor reacted first, a low hum vibrating through his entire body, as if telling him there was no need for violence. The being spoke, its voice both foreign and familiar, resonating within Elias's mind. You seek answers, human. But know this, some questions are not meant to be answered. Some knowledge, once uncovered, cannot be undone. Elias's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. Who are you? The being tilted its head, an almost imperceptible gesture. We are the keepers of the forgotten. We are all that remains of the Eridek. We are not the last of our kind, but the last of our purpose. We guard the knowledge that destroyed us. Elias frowned. The knowledge? What did you discover? The keeper's figure flickered for a moment, as if the very concept of time was shifting around it. We unlocked the secrets of the universe, the fundamental laws that govern all things. But there are dangers in such knowledge. Once you glimpse the infinite, you begin to crave it. And in craving it, you forget your own limitations. Elias could feel the weight of those words settle on him. The armor that had chosen him, it wasn't just a weapon, a tool. It was a key to that knowledge. But was he prepared to use it? The keeper stepped closer, its presence filling the room, and Elias could sense a deep sadness emanating from it. The Eridek fell because they sought to control what should never have been controlled. The armor you now wear, human, is the last remnant of that power. It chose you, yes. But know this, just as the Eridek were undone by their ambition, so too can you fall. Elias swallowed hard. I'm not like them. I don't seek to control it. I need to understand it. I need to know what happened to them to find a way to ensure this doesn't happen again. The keeper regarded him silently for a long moment, its glowing eyes piercing through the hood. Your intentions are different, but the consequences may still be the same. The armor rejected all others because it knew they were not ready. You, human, are not ready. But you may be the last hope of your kind. Elias felt a surge of urgency in his chest. Last hope? The keeper nodded. The galaxy is on the brink of a new era, one that will unfold with the arrival of others who seek the armor's power. They will come for it, as the Zareks did. And if they are not stopped, if the knowledge locked within the armor falls into the wrong hands, the consequences will be unimaginable. The room seemed to darken, the weight of the keeper's words heavy on Elias's heart. He had always thought of humanity as small, insignificant, a species struggling to find its place in the vastness of the cosmos. But now, it seemed, humanity had been thrust into something far larger, a conflict that could reshape the entire galaxy. The keeper raised a hand, and suddenly, the obelisk before Elias flared to life, its runes glowing with an eerie brilliance. The armor must be returned to its place. Its power cannot remain with you if you cannot prove yourself worthy. The galaxy is not kind to those who wield it without understanding. Elias stared at the glowing pillar, then back at the keeper. He knew what had to be done. The galaxy would not wait. But he was not ready, at least, not yet. He had to learn more, to understand the full scope of what the armor could do, and to prepare for the storm that was coming. I'll prove myself, Elias said, his voice steady. The keeper nodded once. Then, you must follow the path of the Eridek. Learn from their mistakes. Discover what was hidden here, before the knowledge consumes you as it did them. With that, the keeper stepped back, fading into the shadows, leaving Elias alone in the vast, alien chamber. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the armor had chosen him for a reason, and now, it was up to him to fulfill its purpose. The galaxy would soon learn the power of humanity. But Elias knew that power alone wouldn't be enough. He had to be more than just a vessel for the armor's strength. He had to become something greater, something that could stand against the forces that would come for it. With a deep breath, Elias turned and walked toward the heart of the station, ready to uncover the secrets that would shape his destiny.